Throughout history, abortions have been a source of considerable debate and controversy. While the current abortion debate has played a prominent role in the recent political campaigns, many would be surprised by the unlikely places that this topic is shown in, such as children's books and poems. Dr. Seuss was an American writer, cartoonist, and artist. He entertained several generations of young readers, and he not only told fantasy tales, he also gave a unique visual language that helped others perceive the world in a new way. His work includes several of the most popular children's books of all time, and one of those being Horton Hears a Who. Gwendolyn Brooks is one of the most highly regarded and widely read poets of the 20th century. She is the first Black author to win the Pulitzer Prize, and she was the first Black woman to be the poetry consultant to the Library of Congress. Along with several other pieces of work, one of her most famous poems is The Mother. Horton Hears a Who was published in 1954 and is most commonly known as one of Seuss's most powerful anti-prejudice books. In Horton Hears a Who, Horton, an elephant, discovers that there's a whole town full of tiny people on a speck of dust. His neighbors think he's lost his mind, but Horton decides it's his calling to protect the life on the speck. Dr. Seuss claims that he wrote the book after visiting Japan, and it was supposed to prove that the Whos stand for any group of people threatened by a more powerful group. However, since the 1980s, Horton Hears a Who has drawn the attention of many activists and has been interpreted to be an anti-abortion parable. According to Dr. Seuss's wife, Audrey Giesel, Seuss never wanted any of his characters to advance any political purpose. Many disagree with this, as Dr. Seuss was very political, and he created more than 400 different political cartoons throughout his career. Dr. Seuss was a liberal Democrat who favored women's rights, so they saw it as fair to infer that he did not support abortions and that his intent was to promote pro-life. There are various pieces of evidence within the story to show that abortion is an underlining message in the book. The biggest giveaway is the quote, "A person's a person, no matter how small." Despite the fact that the book was written in the 1950s, long before the legalization of abortion in 1973, the statement has become an anthem to crowds of anti-abortion rights activists all over. The quote, "As a favor to me, try not to disturb them, just please let them be," clearly states how Dr. Seuss acknowledges there are multiple abortion cases throughout the country, and he is willing to stand for their rights. The kangaroo of the story represents those who are pro-choice. By making it the antagonist of the story, it can be inferred that Dr. Seuss does not support their stance on the issue. This can be seen through the quote from the kangaroo that says, "What rot! This elephant's talking about whos who are not. They aren't any whos." His support for pro-life is yet again seen through the quote, "Please don't harm all my little folks, who have such a right to live as much bigger folks do." A great connection between pro-life supporters and pro-choice supporters can also be seen through the quote, "I'll stick by you, small folks, through thin and through thick. Hump, humped a voice. For almost 2 days you've run wild and insisted on chatting with persons who never existed," showing that Seuss himself supports pro-life and he is against those who believe that babies do not exist and do not deserve to live. To the words of Dr. Seuss, it was not his intention to write a book on his views of abortion. But with further analysis, it is hard to deny that there are parallels between the underlying message of Horton Hears a Who and pro-life positions. While some stories seem to have underlying messages hidden within, the poem The Mother takes a more direct approach, and it is clear that the author's intent was to provide an emotionally complex and sensitive view on a difficult topic. This poem is an intricate portrait of a woman who has had an abortion. Since the poem focuses largely on the emotions that go along with having an abortion, it is clear that Brooks uses pathos to grab the attention of the reader and gets them to sympathize for the characters. Throughout the poem, Brooks also manages to ask many political questions without taking an obvious for or against stand on the issue, unlike Seuss, where it was clear where he laid. The Mother was published in 1945, almost 30 years before the landmark court decision Roe v. Wade, which granted women the right to have an abortion. Much like other feminists, Brooks made politics personal, and it was doing so in a time and place where feminism wasn't exactly the norm. This ensures us that she is using ethos by showing her own personal connection to the issue and giving us confidence in her delivery of the issue. She lets us in on the complexities of the post-abortion emotional experience. The poem itself offers a sensitive, non-judgmental portrait of the woman who had an abortion. Some examples in the poem include, "Abortions will not let you forget. You remember the children you got that you did not get." And, If I poison the beginnings of your breaths, believe that even in my deliberateness, I was not deliberate. All those quotes prove just how much emotion Brooks successfully included within her poem. Lastly, Brooks uses logos throughout her poem to allow the reader to look further into the issue. She first uses logos with the structure of her poem. She starts the poem with her own voice, speaking to the mother on what her children could have been and what pleasures of bringing up a child she will always miss. She then moves into the mother's voice, and the mother talks to her own child who she has killed. Lastly, the mother moves on to talk about the guilt she feels and how she has tried to make excuses to save her from suffering. She uses logos by including comparisons such as comparing what it is like to raise a child and what it is like to lose one. While one is more clear than the other, both of these pieces of literature convey certain messages about abortion, and through textual and rhetorical analysis, the author's stance on the issue can easily be interpreted.